Hi, Alan Bell in Philadelphia.
Hi.
Hi. The introduction to Alan is that he is a South African living in Philadelphia, a very prolific artist and founder of ArcheDream. Did I pronounce it right?
ArcheDream,
ArcheDream
archive,
Computer.
archaeology.
Yeah, an international dance theater company. Quite astounding amount of work and quite a beautiful productions from what I could see from the website. I recommend you go and see his work and what he's done, his life's work. So Alan, tell us about how it was growing up in apartheid South Africa and how being South African has influenced you.
Well, for starters, I'm an orphan, and I was, let's say, rejected at birth and put up for adoption. By the age of 3, I was claimed. So my first name was David, and my name by the adoptive parents was Alan. So I inherited a very, very, very ultra Victorian mother who was totally pro-British. I was apparently a rebel, but I didn't feel like it. So I've just been writing a book about all these memories of growing up. And one of the things I was pointing out is how apartheid looked absolutely normal. It was in the architecture, for example. We had the house. It wasn't it wasn't huge. It was just a little Parkhurst house. And in the back garden, there was a tiny room, and that's where the maid lived. And it was adjacent to the garage. And her toilet was this hole in the ground, which I was terrified to go into in case I slipped and fell into the hole. So it looked absolutely normal. But what I was writing about in my book was the power that children even had to boss around African adults. And I told one of the stories of what I did. The maid was appointed to take me out of the sandpit at a certain time and go and bath me. And I was playing mud and I was doing, and I didn't want to go. I wasn't finished. So she had to grab my hand, the maid, and pull me into the house. And I was cursing her and screaming at her and whatever. And she gets me into the bathroom and I'm standing on the toilet. By now, I'm just crying. I'm just furious. So she gets me naked and the bath water is running. She's still putting in the hot water. And I just decided this is it. I threw myself into the hot water completely naked and screamed my head off. My mother comes rushing in. What's what? And I said, she pushed me. She pushed me. And she was fired on the spot. No interrogation, no questions. My mother would have found out what a wicked little child I was, but she didn't. She thought I was a victim. I used to be horrified seeing the dogs attacking black people outside our house at Greenside because there were too many Africans waiting for the bus. And then the cops would arrive. Or on the maid's day off, more than 3 maids would come into our back garden and they'd sit for the afternoon with their tea and talk about the neighborhood. My home, this is what they do. In my home, this is what they do. And of course, I was there with my big ears listening to all this. And suddenly the neighbor has been counting how many people came into our house and then calls the flying squad. Off they go, all arrested. And then my mother has to spend the whole of tomorrow in Park View somewhere saying that she is our official servant and these were visitors and she didn't do anything wrong and it wasn't a political meeting.
So oppressive.
Yeah, so for example, one night I woke up in my bedroom with 3 cops in the room with a huge flashlight in my face, blinding me. All I could see were these black silhouettes and firing questions at me. Are you the Kaplans? There was a former Jewish family who had our house before we bought it, and they thought we were those Jewish people, and they were Marxists, obviously, and they'd already left for Israel, but they thought we were them. So my father had to put in burglar alarm systems and lights and all kinds of things after that. My poor parents were so paranoid.
I mean, if we as whites were terrified of the police, can you imagine how it was for everyone else?
And we got all the way to Holland. We landed in London, you know, when we came out at Victoria Station, and I looked around, it was quite dirty back then, and I thought, is this London? And I'm saying, what the hell? Anyway, I'm looking around, and it's cold. We went from South Africa summer to northern winter, and I saw this department store, the lights were still on. And I looked and I said to my friends, look, look. And what did we see? White people cleaning the floor, mopping. I said, what is this? And it was my first sight of white people as manual laborers. I couldn't believe my eyes. After that, I became obsessed, man. I was watching white people digging down in the roads. Remember in South Africa, there was always a whole team of black people doing the work and some scrawny white man just hanging around. Apparently the supervisor, bored as hell, with 12 hours to get through before he could get home. So it was a state of confusion, all the time confusion and waking up. This is the big book I made when I left South Africa. You see the mouth of the fox and all the instruments of daily life as the teeth of that fox.
Interesting.
And then the black man at home standing in front of Cape Town and me with an invisible body as an exile. So what I did when I eventually received asylum in Holland, I put myself into house arrest out of sympathy, and then I started working like a devil. I made all these kinds of illustrations. For example, this is the kind of drawing I made.
Yes, very powerful.
So we share the common skeleton.
Yeah.
So when I got to Amsterdam and Mandela was free, and I had to stop saying to myself, what should I be doing today, 24/7? What should I be doing today? I had to say, what do you want to do? And I didn't know myself. I had this midlife crisis. And that's when I began to work. How can I make an art form that is a fusion of African art and the white European tradition? What can I do? And so I have an extensive knowledge of art history of all different nations. And I used to give public lectures, slideshows, and they were very well attended. But it suddenly dawned on me one day that African dance rituals, where they bring the divine into the mundane life, it was a way of the mortal world engaging with the eternal world.
Yes.
And the ancestors and those unborn. So I thought dance. And the masks were always, in every single culture, always the opposite of natural. And I never understood, and in a flash I realized what it is. Masks are the opposite of natural because that's how you enter the spirit world. So I click, and I couldn't copy the mythologies and religion of the Africans. So I used archetypes as the eternal factor.
Right.
And
which is their power.
Which makes them so powerful indeed. So that was on the one side. And in blacklight, which made it totally spiritual, dreamlike. I called it
European tradition of puppetry.
Well, I used allegories, and you know those novels like Pilgrim's Progress, where the man goes on a journey and then he meets Mr. Lazy and Mr. Hard Work, and then he has to make a decision, and then he meets Mr. Pessimistic and Optimistic, and all the way through till he gets to his goal. So I realized that's how I can tell stories using archetypes. But in my naivety, I still didn't understand that although my art form was made out of both their traditions, they didn't get on with each other.
That's why you have the art form, to bring it together.
Well, that was my dedication to achieve. And I wanted to give the best thing I'd ever made. I wanted to give that as my kind of repentance for the nonsense I did unto them when I was a kid and a teenager.
Yes.
And so I had to start again. And I realized I couldn't do what I wanted in South Africa. So I was in America bringing up these two children, my darling Sam and Ella. And they're grown-ups now. And I came to Philadelphia in 2000 with a new art form, ArcheDream for Humankind, ArcheDream, architecture, archaeology. It means original, beginning. So I was trying to establish a beginning moment where I knew I was only the beginning. It would have evolved in its own way, and I wouldn't have to know. It didn't matter. I just wanted to add another branch to the tree of dance. Right. And so our show began in 2000, a new art form, and it was very popular. My gosh.
I sort of so understand now. When I met you in Amsterdam 40 years ago and I saw your apartment with your filled with books, filled to the brim with books, and sat and night talking art history with you.
Yeah, all my studying to know what is better. Yeah, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what was better or how to even get there.
The moment that I arrived there, I felt like my education began about what really happened in South Africa. So it's very, very meaningful for me. It was your influence and place in my life that made me sort of turn and look and see what had happened. And I could say, oh my God, look what happened. And somehow, like you said, I didn't have the full comprehension of what was going on. I had an inkling, I had an understanding. We had a little bit of things going on, police watching the house. We had certain things. My parents had friends of friends, but I had no idea how oppressive it really was. I had no sense. And so that was when my education began, once I left.
Well, I'm very happy to be such a person.